Welcome to the coffee show, everyone. We've had some technical difficulties before getting started this afternoon, and I apologise to Dr. Dean Miller and Sir Pete Licata, who's sitting right next to me. Welcome to the coffee show, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with Pete Licata. So Pete is a World Barista Champion and now founder of a company called Caffeine Control Coffee based out of here in Melbourne. So Pete, give us the elevator pitch of Caffeine Control Coffee.
Okay, well, elevator pitch would be, look, most people don't know how much caffeine is in their coffee. All of us love coffee. But in reality, in the real world, we need to be able to control how much caffeine we have, know what we're having and how much we're having and when we're having it. So what we're trying to do is bring clarity of how much caffeine is in the coffee and sort of advice on when you should have it.
And Dr. Dean Miller, you're a doctor in, I was reading up on your LinkedIn profile yesterday, but there was a bit of psychology in there and...
Yeah, it's a bit complex, but yeah, essentially I have a PhD in sleep and circadian rhythms. So I've done research in the past in sleep among athletes, effects of different sources of energy, and but yeah, my undergrad is in psychology, and then my research is more in this space.
I was really looking through some of your work previously. So you do work with professional athletes like Steve Smith. How did that come about?
Yeah, so through my PhD, I did a lot of work with the Australian Institute of Sport, collaborating with them on some research projects, looking at wearable tech, nutritional ingredients that may impact sleep, and a few other things. And yeah, through there, you just end up making connections with either teams or athletes, and get to work with a really, really high performers. Worked with the Air Force for a while as well, but yeah, now at the moment back in academia at a university, in the trenches doing the research and teaching again.
I was saying to Pete before we started this afternoon, that there probably is not a better day for me to interview you guys about this, because I'm a shocking sleeper. Like, I'm real bad. Ever since like I can remember, I've always been an early riser. So I'm up at these days. This morning I woke up at 2:30 a.m. and I went to bed at 10 p.m. and that happens pretty regularly for me. And I try and go to bed earlier. Like yesterday was my birthday, so celebrating a little bit.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. I mean, I don't understand why that happens to me. What's the go there? Like, is it natural for someone to, since birth, just no matter how much sleep they get, they just always wake up at the same time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And sleep, everyone has their own sleep story, kind of similar to coffee. Everyone has their own sort of relationship with coffee. But what we conceptualize there with those individual differences is something we call chronotype. So chronotype is whether you're an early person or an late person, morning or evening, and there's high variability from person to person. And I mean, the theory back in the day is that it was not safe for us when we were living in the wild for everyone to be asleep at the same time. So that's basically the theory around why we're like that. Where the differences lie is that, we'll get a little bit into the circadian stuff a bit later, I imagine, but we have circadian rhythms, and each person's circadian rhythm is a slightly different length. And unfortunately, our society these days is very stringent that it's a 24-hour day and you work during this time and you wake up at this time typically. So at times for people on either end of that spectrum, it can be really hard to get sleep at the right time.
Well, I really wanted to link this into as sleep and coffee are related to each other, because it kind of seems like the two things in a lot of people's lives struggle to coexist harmoniously, I guess. Obviously, I'm a lifelong coffee guy, and I've also had like lifelong sleep issues. And then Pete, you've had a really interesting journey with your partner who I believe, well, you can tell the story of how Caffeine Control started. I'm just going to turn the aircon on.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so Caffeine Control Coffee came about from a combination of both my own personal sort of struggles with stress and overwork and burnout and poor sleep and all kinds of things like that, as well as at the same time my wife becoming pregnant and getting ready to have a baby. Both of those things have have a big interaction with caffeine, and we're both worked in the coffee industry. For different reasons, obviously. But yeah, like between myself and the amount of caffeine I was having, the frequency, and the lack of just sort of, I guess, control or knowledge of what I was having, definitely added up over time to some pretty big stress events. And then my wife, she had her first child, and she didn't really pay too much attention to the coffee, but she definitely had less caffeine. I think just naturally she didn't want as much, but we had no idea in terms of the guidance and whatever else was happening. So we became much more conscious of that with the second baby.
And I think one sort of interesting point of convergence for coffee and sleep is probably the health discussion in general. I don't think within the coffee industry we promote health enough among coffee professionals or even coffee drinkers, to be quite honest. And that's probably a good thing about what Pete's doing. In a general sense, Dean, what are some of the things that people probably don't understand about sleep and coffee sort of together?
Yeah, I guess the most common misconception when people speak to me as a sleep scientist is that I'd be anti-caffeine. Quite the contrary, because it's really the most potent countermeasure for fatigue. When we go to conferences that look at fatigue or sleep conferences, time and time again, caffeine comes out as the top sort of countermeasure for fighting against sleep loss, at least acutely, if we want to say. Contextualize it in shift work. Someone may use caffeine to be able to continue to perform their job, whether that's making photocopies in an office or performing brain surgery. So we are, as sleep scientists, we use caffeine a lot as a tool within reason, obviously. And then, it's really just that balance between using it as a countermeasure for how sleep loss affects us physiologically, and then making sure that we don't overuse it, so then it actually messes with our sleep after the fact. So, it's a bit of a push-pull relationship, but it's definitely a tool that is really useful. And my view on it is why don't couple that with good quality sources of caffeine like coffee.
So why is sleep one of those, pardon the pun, one of those health issues that's slept on?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I guess recently, probably in the last 10 to 15 years, it's started to flip a little bit, and there's been a lot of attention on sleep. But really, when we look at it behaviorally, it's often the first thing that people compromise on, just because life happens, right? And once you sort of contextualize it to, I don't know, again, shift work or whatever it may be, you can actually get used to a level of performance or a level of alertness during the day that's actually below your baseline, and you've been doing it for so long that you don't actually notice what that consistent sleep loss is how that's affecting you. So I think people do get used to not getting enough sleep and performing at that lower level. But increasingly we're getting a lot more interest in people, I guess, quote unquote, optimizing their sleep is the new sort of catchphrase, and people collecting data and I guess having a more health related focus to their sleep, so that they can then exercise the next day or perform at their best at work or whatever it may be.
I was thinking about anxiety as well this morning, and kind of how, like, in my mind, and please correct me if I'm going on a tangent that's irrelevant here, but sleep, over consumption of caffeine, and anxiety they all coexist in a bad way. Like, I habitually go to work in the morning and have so many coffees because I'm, dialing in at the cafe or whatever. And then, later on the day, it prevents me from being able to sleep properly. And then I think I wake up anxious. Like, do you think anxiety is one of those things as well that needs to be within this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a feedback loop in that sleep deprivation impacts mood. We know that when I was doing studies in the lab, where we sleep deprived people and we track people's mood, inevitably the longer people are awake, the more their mood's going to deteriorate. And we know that to be true. And then, yeah, I guess the addition of using a stimulant like caffeine or whatever it may be, which is a stimulant, so it's going to do the opposite of relaxing you, could potentially add to that. So yeah, it is a fine balancing act between the two, and I guess that's what I think is so great about Pete and what Pete's doing, is it sort of gives the ability to first consider that caffeine intake and to sort of tailor it to your own situation.
And so what is the limit to what the average person can have coffee-wise? Like, I know it's a very general term, and I could understand like quite a complex answer, but for the layman's term, for the average punter listening to this podcast, what's the general limit to how much one person should probably have? What's healthy?
Well, I mean, there's specific health guidance from Australian, European, and like American food and drug agencies. And unanimously, it's basically 400 milligrams of caffeine per day is the recommended amount of caffeine. What people can tolerate is far higher than that. The lethal dose of caffeine is, I remember reading a source 35 years ago that said 2 grams of caffeine, like 2,000 milligrams, but I think it's something like 6 grams, or it's a lot. It's more than you would get reasonably from coffee without making yourself really sick. And you would probably vomit up coffee before you started to absorb all of that. But yeah, it's a very high dose that would be lethal.
So what's 400 milligrams in lattes?
Yeah, so that's the good question, right? So this is the issue, is that nobody knows generally, right? So we have guidance, we have understanding. There's a bit of, I don't know if I would call it misinformation on the internet, but it's incomplete information on the internet, because there's people say like, well, an espresso shot has how much caffeine? Some people will say 60 milligrams per shot, right? I say it's probably higher. I say it's probably closer to 100 milligrams, but it depends on the dose of coffee, right? So the problem with all of the information we have out there is that there's nobody who has really meticulously tracked, or very little information in terms of how much coffee dry dosage, extraction, and or yield came out of that formula to make that cup of coffee. So that chart that says your filter coffee in an 8-ounce cup has 140 milligrams may be correct for what they measured, but it doesn't give us relevance to what every cup of coffee is, because they're all different. You know how we make coffee in a cafe, we change the dose. We adjust things. We move it around. Some cafes use 24 grams of coffee to make an espresso. Some people only serve doubles. Some people use, an Italian style espresso may use, 12 or 14 grams of coffee for a double, and they split that, right? It's like they can be all over the board. So general guidance is, if you said a cup of coffee, whether it be an espresso or a milk coffee, you're probably 80 to 100 milligrams is a safe guess, right? It might be a little higher than that.
So I can have 4 coffees a day.
Yeah, four coffees.
4?
Yeah. Like I'd say, depending on what the coffee is though, right? So it may be more appropriate to have 3. But 3 to 4 coffees is about right for most people in that guidance of 400 milligrams.
So we don't need to cut down really at all, because 3 to 4 is like probably excessive for a lot of people, right?
It depends. Some people have far more than that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, this might be where Dr. Dean comes in.
Yeah, it's a great discussion. The only thing we haven't considered yet is timing. So we've got the dose, then the timing. And yeah, Pete's spot on with all of those numbers. And the additional thing to consider, which is, I don't even think the research space itself has caught up with this yet, and I predict it's going to be the next sort of caffeine related research is individualizing the impact of caffeine on the person. So we metabolize caffeine differently from person to person. We have different sensitivities. I know my grandfather-in-law can have a latte just before bed and sleep absolutely fine. Whether his sleep is as deep as it would be otherwise, not sure. But there are those inter-individual differences. There was a systematic review done by researchers up in Queensland recently, led by Dr. Carissa Gardner, who's a good friend of mine, who I affectionately want to call her Dr. Caffeine, but she's hesitant to be labelled that. And their recommendations based on basically pooling all previous data looking at caffeine and sleep for coffee was to finish your last coffee within 8.8 hours of bedtime. Now, that's a conservative recommendation because obviously some people will be less than that, some people potentially be more than that. But when we pull all the data together, that's the answer we get. And it's even closer for caffeine sources like pre-workout, for example, which I think was only like 5 hours. 12 hours, 12 hours before bedtime. There's the cutoff for that. So
pre-workout,
not great news.
like, what about like an energy drink? I think that anyone that drinks an energy drink like a Red Bull or a V or Monster is so hardcore. Like people think that I'm like badass having this many coffees a day. If you drink Red Bull or V or Monster, you have some serious hairs on your chest. I mean, I'm out. Like I can't do that. That is like a level of masculinity I cannot ever aspire to.
I mean,
it's.
I mean, not that it's like gendered or anything, but it's like it just those things are hardcore.
Yeah, and what I see on my end is a sort of a more with my practitioner hat on and working with people working in shift work or working in the military or whatever it may be. They reach for the energy drinks first because it's a more convenient option and they know how much caffeine's in it.
Yeah.
So that's Pete can speak to this as well. Why I've sort of I'm a big advocate for one, being able to control your caffeine with coffee as well, and still enjoy that coffee and not necessarily go for the Red Bull or go for an energy drink.
So if you're a doctor of sleep who's pro caffeine and obviously very pro sleep, what's your optimum sort of routine for someone that's listening to this and they want to figure out something for their own selves? Like with your coffee drinking habits, what do you do?
So at the moment, what I'm doing is I just have I delay my coffee a little bit in the morning. I don't have it first thing. And there's been a bit of noise about this in the podcasting world about don't have your coffee first thing in the morning. And the rationale to that, I guess, is how caffeine affects us is through blocking adenosine in the brain. And basically what that is, it's blocking the sleep pressure that builds up in your brain throughout the day. And if you have a coffee first thing in the morning, you don't have heaps of sleep pressure unless you had really bad sleep. So they're saying maybe wait a few hours. But I'm sort of a realist in that if you have a newborn or if you have 3 kids, you have to get to school, and that cup of coffee in the morning is going to help you get those kids in the car, or it's going to help you open the cafe in the morning. Absolutely go for it. It's going to still have that performance effect that's going to help you. But yeah, I personally wait till around 10 a.m., have a little double shot piccolo, and then my recent habit has been probably mid-arvo, just around now. Pete's, I think it's a 33% caffeine blend, or 100 milligrams per serving maybe. So I pour over in the afternoon so I can have more of it and have less caffeine.
Okay. Yeah. So talk us through that, Pete. So Pete Licata, World Barista Champion here, and he's got Caffeine Control Coffee, and you've got 4 blends with 4 varying amounts of caffeine.
Yep.
So ranging from in your face to nothing. Talk us through that.
Okay, so that concept, and this is basically our house blends that we do at the company. The idea is, once again, like I don't think caffeine's bad. I just think that we need to be able to control it and manage it. So we have fully caffeinated coffee, and with certain varieties, certain origins of coffee, the elevation that it grows at, things like that, dictates that some coffees, Arabica coffees, will have naturally more caffeine than others. But we have Brazil, El Salvador blend that we do. It's about 125 milligrams per serving as a standard coffee. And that's great to know. It's not what every regular coffee is going to have in it, but that's what ours has in it. But the whole idea is that to say, I want to have a coffee, because what I found myself was cutting out caffeine. And I was like, I really want to have a coffee. And sometimes I really want to have some caffeine. Sometimes I'm feeling a little groggy, I'm a little slow. Afternoon, sort of, post lunch, I'm a little sluggish. I want to have a pick me up, but I know that if I have another full coffee right now, say 2 p.m., 3 p.m., I'm going to be feeling it later. Like I have trouble getting to sleep, or I'm sleeping restlessly. My sleep quality is not the best. So that was where the idea of coming up with blends with different caffeine amounts, blending in decaf and regular coffees came into play, is to say, like, well, I want how much coffee? I want about this much caffeine in that blend, but I still want a great tasting cup. So we came up with 4, with essentially 100% and 0, fully decaf and fully caffeinated. We have 33% caffeinated and 67% caffeinated. And I feel like this gives a good range of option. So you can say, I want a little more, a little bit less. But it makes it more than just your half calf. Plenty of people can work with a half calf too. It's totally fine. But we wanted to have a little more range within that. And at the same time, it lets me kind of taper down, right? So I want to start, I like the same thing where I'll start in the morning with a fully caffeinated coffee, usually about an hour or so after I wake up. It takes me a little while to make some coffee. I got to make my daughter's lunch. I got to do all this other stuff. By the time I get all that done, been up for about an hour. Say a similar thing that Dr. Dean was talking about, some of the guidance is maybe you're trying to clear out, what is it, cortisol or whatever from your sleep. And is it cortisol? Whatever.
Yeah, the cortisol awakening response, which is 100% normal.
Yeah. So we want to let some of that clear out or whatever. But I was like, okay, cool. It works for me. Wait about an hour, have my first cup, but then I'll have another cup 10 o'clock or so, and I want a little bit less caffeine. So personally, because I'm willing to change out my coffees, every time I brew one, I'll have a little bit less caffeine and a little bit less caffeine. Oftentimes have the 33% one, 2-3 p.m. It's a nice little pick-me-up, but not too much. And then actually what's interesting, my wife's gotten into recently is having a decaf in the evening. Like we're put the girls to bed and we're sitting watching a movie or watching TV or doing something on the couch, and just like relaxing for the last few hours of the day. And she wants to have a coffee. And she's been really loving that coffee with a little milk she puts into it. And I taste it. I'm like, it is really fulfilling. It's not a tea. Sometimes I want to have a tea. I love tea, but it's not the same taste experience. It's not the same thing.
Just goes to show how much of a ritual it all is for us. And like, if you can do it in a healthy way that isn't detrimental to your sleep, then that's fantastic. Which is what you're enabling people to do. And by the way, I use Caffeine Control at my cafe. So if you're looking for good quality decaf, which at your cafe or even at home, you should hit up Pete at caffeinecontrolcoffee.com. Caffeinecontrol.coffee.com.au does still go to the website. I have the web domain. Caffeinecontrol.coffee. I'm a big advocate for it. I've got the World Barista Champion here, who's got a very good knowledge of coffee, and I've got Dr. Dean Miller, specializing in sleep. Can I put to you guys? I know this is a bit impromptu, if you will, but I told you before I'm a bit of a shocking sleeper, right? And I'm sure there's plenty of other people that listening to this that might be. I want to try and come up with a treatment plan for Kirk.
Okay.
And I want to check back in with you in a few months because it would change my life. I'm at the point these days where my eye's twitching, and that's not a good sign. I feel like Dean's nodding his head no. It would be life changing for me if I could get proper sleep and having a new business and loving coffee as much as I do. It's challenging. So as well as that, I love a good movie and things like that, or love to play some Pokemon before bed. I'm trying to give you the full picture here so we can come up with a good treatment plan for Kirk. Starting with Dr. Dean, what would your advice be to me?
My advice, and we've touched on it a little bit already, and Pete made a great point about his wife and that habitual sort of routine. And whenever we look at sort of generalized health or sleep advice, you'll see the term sleep hygiene. It's not how clean your sheets are. It's just, the behaviors that you do leading into bed. And obviously caffeine is not one of those, but the ability of having a good quality decaf and having that warm drink at night in that context is a really great recommendation and a great example. So really, I guess, Kirk, you're an early riser and work in coffee, so caffeine is a part of your day and will be for the foreseeable future. So yeah, it would really just be controlling the dose and the timing. Make sure you're not having too much. You probably have a generally high tolerance for caffeine, I'm assuming, given your area of expertise.
I feel like it's waning though.
Yeah.
I feel like it's. I don't know if any of you have knowledge on this, but I feel like my resistance is kind of declining. I feel like I'm more affected by it than ever now. Is there any merit to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So potentially, yeah. So it can, I guess, as we age, our sleep changes, our ability to metabolize changes. So if you're noticing that, yeah, for sure, that can be a sign to either tinker with your dose and timing of sleep or caffeine is essentially, I guess, the snapshot of it and what you can adjust. Sleep specifically, you've touched on being a really early riser, and a lot of people are. And unfortunately, yeah, sometimes that's not the most conducive sleep schedule to 2025 society. Yeah. But what we recommend is like almost the most important thing now is consistency in your bedtime and wake time. So if you are going to bed early and waking up early, sticking to that is really what's going to help you get that good quality sleep each night. But yeah, I guess we can come up with a plan longer term. Usually we take a snapshot of about 2 weeks when we look at people's schedules and see what we can tinker with around their sleep, caffeine, and other behaviours.
And Pete, as the coffee professional on the panel, what would your advice be to someone like me?
So, I mean, I just went through this, right? Like I was not sleeping well. I actually got it's an Apple Watch. It wasn't a massive, amazing sleep tracker, but you could tell pretty easily that my sleep quality was really poor. And I had some marked improvements with that. But you know, it's the same story. Working in coffee, I was working for a company at the time, have to taste coffee every day, have to put it in your mouth. You're going to absorb caffeine no matter what. So what are the solutions? One is to try to spit, right? To not swallow and ingest all of the coffee that you're tasting. We love to taste coffee, but you know, if you can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to spit some of this, or also just having less. So saying like, yeah, I'm okay with leaving a cup of coffee that I've taken a few sips out of. If I'm, either sometimes you're not into it, but sometimes it's just like, I know what this is going to do to me. Super tasty. I'll give you my feedback, but I don't need to drink the whole thing. Some of those types of things are really useful. Trying to time your activities for coffee tasting earlier in the day. So once again, you're up early, get your caffeine earlier. As Dr. Dean had said, like that general sort of advice of like 8 hours plus before bedtime, of not having more coffee, specifically like fully caffeinated coffee. Those types of things I definitely worked on. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to give you medical advice, but I will say personally, anecdotally, I looked holistically at my whole lifestyle as well. It's like drinking too much wine. Love a good wine. Love a good wine. It's great, but it's also, I think in the coffee industry, we have this cycle, right? We caffeinate all morning and then we drink too much in the evening to kind of even ourselves out a bit. And that's not really the way the body is working, not where those hormones are working, but it makes us feel like we're doing something. So interestingly enough, I had a recommendation from my doctor. He's like, before anything else, she just said, like, why don't you, just cut out alcohol? And I did. And I was like, I generally feel better for not having any alcohol for, it was like a month or something, but it didn't really fix my sleep issues. Right. But the way that I look at it is like moderation obviously is a good thing. Cutting back, having a little bit less alcohol, having a little bit more physical activity, all those things that are usually recommended, right? Better, regular exercise, better diet. The cruciferous vegetables is a huge one.
Cruciferous vegetables.
Yeah.
What are they?
Well, so like broccoli, cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts.
They're all good for sleep?
Well, no, they're good for your liver,
Oh.
right? So they apparently, based off of some research that I've read, I'm just like I say, I'm not a doctor, but they seem to increase the liver enzyme that is also breaks down caffeine.
Okay.
So as like I said, I was like, look, there's nothing wrong with eating more veggies. Like you're never gonna have a bad recommendation of eating more veggies. Give it a try. Have some cauliflower, whatever. But yeah, like just those types of things. Trying to drink more water. Try to stay hydrated. One of the bad things we do really poorly in the coffee industry is stay hydrated. I think.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes electrolytes as well. Like I felt like there's something. I get that feeling that you're just dehydrated. Like you're not. Like you're drinking water, but you're not retaining it.
Does hydration, like lack of hydration, affect your sleep at all?
Yeah, it can do. Yeah, because what we want when we're going to bed, and it's the same with meals, is we don't want the body to be overworking in areas of digestion or compensating for dehydration when it's trying to sleep. So yeah, hydration is definitely key as well, and not having too much of a big meal close to bedtime.
One thing I feel like that we're kind of fixed to in coffee that I think will change in the future is the size of the serving that we currently get. So like right now to make a coffee, say for example, you use 20 grams in and you get 2 shots out, and then so that's 40 mils of espresso. If you make one coffee, that's 20 mils of espresso. But there's not an option for 10 mils of espresso and then what half the regular flat white would be, when it's probably like a good option. So we're kind of stuck with the portions that we've got, and not really many people have asked the question about why that is. I mean, we all like a decent size or portion of coffee, but I kind of feel like in the future, like a lot of coffee will be pre-made, like espresso will be pre-made. So you'll be able to play with those portion sizes a lot more. Like, probably a bit of merit to that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you can manage that through drink size, beverage size, but that's also one of the reasons we made different levels of caffeine blends, right? It's because then you get into a strength issue at some point, right? So it's like I can have 10 mils of espresso, but then I still want that strength of coffee in my regular size drink, right? So it's going to break a lot of norms to say, okay, yeah, if you have it in a piccolo, it's not going to seem like it's super weak or anything like that. But if you have it in a 6-ounce latte, it might taste a little weak to you. So there's a balancing act between how we do that. I've tried to start recommending serving sizes based off of sort of a 10-gram dose, because that gives you at least an easy metric to do a little bit of math on. If you say, essentially 0.8 to 1.2 milligrams per gram of coffee, or is it 1.2? 0.8 to 1.2%, I think is what it is, of the dry coffee weight is essentially how much caffeine you'll get. So if you do that in a really simple metric with regular coffee, you're going to say, okay, we're going to have between 80 and 120 milligrams of caffeine, averaging it out to about 100 with a 10-gram dose, right? So all of our recipes are based off of a 10-gram dose. We usually do a lot of 20 grams for a double and split the shot or split the brew. But there's a couple of ways you can go about it with dosage. There's not a recommended number of doses or servings or serving size of coffee, but I think breaking it down to the dose of coffee can help to do that. But like I say, there's no regulation in the industry too, so whatever comes up with that works and makes sense to your customers can probably do that pretty well.
Dr. Dean, I feel like you probably get asked on a few podcasts, and obviously for the subject of sleep. What's something that you don't get asked often, or you haven't been asked ever, that you think, like I'm sure I've asked you a bunch of questions that you've been asked a bunch of times, but what's something that you do in your daily research that you're like, man, the world needs to know about this. Some podcaster needs to ask me this.
To be honest with you, and I'd like to clarify that I don't work with Pete at all in any capacity. I'm just an admirer of what he's doing. But to keep it on the theme of coffee, I guess this is probably the most sleeper-related countermeasure that I've used in my daily life as a sleep scientist. I'm generally quite lucky in that I sleep well, and I've never really struggled with sleep up and touch wood. But being able to control my caffeine intake using Pete's beans has sort of been the thing that I've made the most effort with in my sleep schedule. In terms of questions people have asked me, I regularly do some radio segments, and you would be surprised the rogue questions I guessed. So I've been hit with a lot, so feel free to throw any left field questions.
You feel like you've been asked them all?
I've had topics relating to people attaching their bed to the ground through a copper wire to get better sleep, and yeah,
is that effective?
We get I wouldn't suggest it. No, there's some evidence that it might impact your stress levels in the body, but no, that's definitely not an emerging field. But yeah, I guess answering your question, I think that this particular discussion around quality control of caffeine is probably what I haven't spoken much about on other podcasts, because up until using these beans, that really hasn't been a good quality option to other than energy drinks.
Well, that's a really good point that you raised, because decaf is one of those things that gets a lot less love in the industry, and I'm guilty of it. We've all been guilty of it in the coffee fraternity at some stage, where we don't put as much love into our decaf. And this is not an ad, but using Pete's decaf has been such a pleasure, because you've got what's the one, super decaf that we use at the moment?
Yeah, super decaf. That's only at Project Zero, by the way, right now.
It's only at Project Zero, but since we've started using it, like the people noticing how much better it is has been really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Like you can have it black, you can have it with milk. As a latte, it tastes like soft serve. So it's just awesome. I've never had a decaf like that. But why is sleep worth investing in? Why is having good sleep worth investing in? Because I was watching, in preparation for this, I was watching the Diary of a CEO podcast, and I forget the doctor who's
Kristen Holmes.
Yeah,
and I've worked with Kristen.
And like the way he kind of explained it was like revolutionary. In the sense that it's like people need to wake up to why sleep is so important. And it was a good kick up the bum for me, because I'm just thinking to myself, man, I need to knuckle down. If I implement what these guys are saying, it would change my life. Like, before you guys came in, I was just sort of just feeling so tired because of the lack of sleep I had last night. Like, why is good sleep worth investing in?
Ironically, we haven't come up with a good answer to why we sleep. We know that when we don't sleep, we perform really badly. We have massive mood fluctuations, and that it's generally bad for us when we don't sleep. There's a few things at play, and there's a lot of noise in the podcast world. There's about what happens when you don't sleep well. What I try to focus on a little bit more is how simple, in isolation of sleep disorders, I will say that's the caveat, is how simple it is to manage our sleep as a healthy individual, obviously around our schedules. Giving our body consistent timing is going to give us the best chance to get good quality sleep. And in isolation of sleep disorders, our bodies are very resilient and very good at getting the sleep that we need. We'll cycle through the sleep stages that we need if you give it the opportunity to sleep at the right time consistently. When we get people in the lab, and you can Google polysomnography if you're listening, which is how we measure sleep in the lab. It's all those wires you see on people's heads and measuring brain activity. And often we get participants in there, and we put them under conditions, and their sleep is miraculously resilient, unless obviously we keep them up for sleep deprivation protocol. So I think my main, if I was to say one main takeaway for someone listening to this around their sleep health, is invest in even just the baseline level of how our sleep physiology works, and to your point, Kirk, about anxiety and worrying about your sleep as well. Once you sort of have that fundamental understanding of, okay, I've got sleep pressure that builds up through the day, and I've got a circadian rhythm that fluctuates approximately every 24 hours. And as long as I keep that consistent, both of those things is going to get me good sleep.
in
isolation of.
What is a circadian rhythm?
Okay, so circadian rhythms are any sort of biological process that run approximately 24 hours per day. So, for example, core body temperature, when you wake up in the morning, will start rising and it'll probably hit its peak probably around now. So as we're recording this, so 3, 4 p.m. And that's sort of when we're supposed to be peaking in our performance. And then into the evening and into when we sleep, our core body temperature go back down. And then it'll bottom out at around 3, 4 a.m. and then it'll come back up again. So that cycle is a circadian rhythm. There's rhythms for cortisol and other physiological processes. And basically, circadian rhythms is the collective term for all of them. And that indicates our timing of our physiology. So if we keep our behaviors consistent, those rhythms will be consistent and sleep then follows. So it's almost like if you conceptualize it with you have one chance to catch the bus in the morning and if you miss it slightly, you're going to be every bus you miss, you're going to be 10 minutes later. If you miss your sleep period in its timing, the further you're away from it, the later you're going to be or the worse you're going to perform the next day. The main two things is that's prior wake, the sleep pressure, and those circadian rhythms. And that's where shift work comes into play because that throws out our circadian rhythms completely.
Yeah, my girlfriend's father works doing shift work and has done for like 20 years. I could never do that.
Yeah. It's hard yakka. And we do have a study currently because the only things that can affect our circadian rhythms is obviously sleep, the sunlight that we get, and melatonin supplementation. But we've actually, led by Professor Greg Roach and Professor Charlie Sargent, we're running a study at the moment to see whether caffeine itself can actually move circadian rhythms, which, if it can, will be sort of revolutionary finding, so that caffeine could actually be used in shift work settings, not only to keep people awake and alert, but to also help move their rhythms where we want them to be.
What's some of the work that you've done with athletes? I'm curious because I'm a big time fight fan, love my UFC, and there was a fighter, his name's Sean O'Malley, and for one of his fights, he consulted some sort of sleep specialist that helped him adjust to a time zone or something. So it's like, getting the right amount of sleep for that. Has that been something you've worked on with athletes in your program or?
Yeah, primarily my work with athletes has been in that jet lag adaptation space. So I spent 2 years with the Australian Institute of Sport and still work with them in jet lag adaptation, circadian rhythms. So for the Olympics last year, I worked with the Institute of Sport to give jet lag plans to all Australian athletes and staff to get them onto Paris time zone. So essentially what we're doing there is what I touched on before is using light to manipulate the body clock so that people will recover from jet lag faster. So jet lag essentially is the same thing as shift work. We call it circadian misalignment, when your circadian rhythms don't line up with the clock time. That's a lot of the work I've been doing. Done studies in that as well. So it's a real science, and it does sound a bit crazy to be able to do that.
What does that see you do? Like you literally turn on a light at a certain time while someone's jet lagged, or?
Yeah, there's a number of protocols depending on the route. They're slightly different, more challenging. So anecdotally, I guess if you've ever travelled from Australia to Europe, it's relatively easy. If you travel from Europe to Australia, it's quite hard to get over jet lag because the timing of your circadian rhythm makes it a bit more complex. But if you need to be getting light and it's dark at your destination, there's a few options. There's some really, I guess, space age looking glasses called Retimer, and there's a few on the market where you put them on. I've actually got a pair somewhere here, and that actually emits light into your eyeballs, and that's validated to help you move your body clock.
Are they on your desk right now?
I can get them. Hang on, what's that?
Yeah, all right. I'm looking forward to this. Speed dealers.
But so these emit a wavelength of light that we know impacts our circadian rhythm. It's the strongest stimulus. Again, not associated with this brand at all. We just use it in our science. I have to take my headphones off. So
go on.
So essentially,
oh yeah,
you see them?
Oh, yeah.
So this green blue wavelength of light is the most sensitive. Again, not sponsored. Stimulus for our circadian rhythms. So I would say, Kirk, you're going to Paris, wear this at between this time and this time. It'll move you maybe a day faster than, and then you'll be able to win the gold medal.
Just keep him on for one more second, Dean. Just keep him on for one more second. He went from Dr. Dean Miller to Dino. Dino, he's
you can
Dino.
call me Dino.
All right, you can take him off now. You can take him
That's fine.
So those things
Within it.
are like you put them on the athlete at 2 a.m. when it's Europe time, and it's like the optimum time for them to transition their sleep sort of thing. You're pulsing them up.
Yeah, it usually aligns with when I was talking before about the core body temperature, the bottom of the core body temperature around 3 a.m. Australia time. So usually it will be around that time, but in Europe, so 3 a.m. Melbourne time, maybe 1600, like 4 p.m. in Paris, which means you'd have sunlight anyway. But let's say, for example, somewhere else that aligned with 9 p.m. and you can't go outside and get sunlight, that's when we would use that. But sunlight is the best option. But when we don't have good quality light outside, that's the second best.
Pete, there's some people probably wouldn't currently be aware, but there's some varieties of coffee, so some different species, if you like. So for those new listening in, there's like green apples, Granny Smith. We've got pink lady apples. It's the same in coffee. We've got different varieties. So there's, it could be Bourbon, but a lesser known one that is actually naturally lower in caffeine is Lorena.
Yep.
So like there's different varieties of coffee. Now I don't think like Lorena's not hugely grown. It's not widely grown.
It's not. There's a number of varieties that are out there. There's Lorena racemosa. There's also Eugenioides, which is a different species of coffee, but has a low caffeine as well.
I'm not an advocate for Eugenioides. I'm sorry.
I don't care for the flavor of it, but it's interesting. But it also has very low caffeine in it. Lorena is probably my favorite one. And it has a little bit more caffeine on average from what I've tested so far than what maybe Eugenioides has or something like that. But yeah, it's naturally growing low caffeine varietals. And that one first launched, I want to say 2006.
What, Lorena?
Yeah, somewhere around there with Deterra in Brazil. At least that's the place that I know of that had it. Maybe it came from somewhere else. And I don't know if it was cultivated specifically for that or if it was a naturally occurring varietal that they then planted and started growing. But it's now popular in a lot of other countries. There's a lot of it growing in Colombia, and it's becoming more popular. I'm actually buying some for the company pretty soon.
Where from?
It'll be from CGLE in Colombia.
Cafe Graja La Esperanza.
Yeah, it'll be really good. Not cheap coffee, by the way. It's also really difficult to grow, right? Because caffeine is a natural pesticide. So the trees tend to be a little bit more susceptible to pests and other things like that. The way they're described is they're a little bit more fragile. So for whatever that might mean for the farmers, it's just a little bit harder to grow. The beans are a bit smaller. It's also called Bourbon Pontu, which is like pointy Bourbon. But it's smaller beans, so the cherries are smaller. It means that they're harder to pick. They're not as easy to just harvest and process. But it's really promising in terms of flavor. I think the flavor of it is outstanding.
It's world class. Have you had Lorena before, Dr. Dean?
I have not.
We got it.
We have some. We'll have to send you some. Because it's a really exciting one. But that one, I've measured it to be about 30 to 40% of normal. Like people will usually say it's 30% of average caffeine. I've measured it a little bit higher, and I think some of that's because of roasting. So when people say it has 30% less caffeine, it's also usually in the green form. And when you roast it, depending on how you roast it, you may end up with a bit more moisture loss. You may have more concentration because it takes more beans to hit that dose range and things like that. And so you may end up with, technically speaking, a little bit more caffeine than what people would say for a 30%, but it's in that 30 to 40% range. So it's definitely a low caffeine variety. The only reason that it's not everywhere as a low caffeine option is because it's hard to grow and it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I was so totally shook when I found out that caffeine is a natural pesticide. So what happens is insects will sort of penetrate the cherry. They'll get a little taste of it. They'll get this whack of caffeine, which to an insect is like a substantially higher dose than it is to us. And then that's how they know not to attack the coffee.
Yeah, there's like 2 or 3 bugs in particular that are okay with the caffeine, right? The coffee berry borer is one of them, right? So it's a CBB or broca is what it's called in Central America.
So what are these, like mutant bugs?
No, they're little beetles, but they're not sensitive to caffeine, so they don't mind it. They'll dig in, and they're one of the bugs that is a problem for coffee production.
Ah.
It was very famous because I was living in Hawaii. We got broca in Hawaii, and that had a huge impact on the production because they eat the coffee cherries as they're getting like green and as they're growing. So the coffees the beans get chewed up, right? They lay little eggs inside, the things hatch and they eat the coffee bean. One of the few bugs that will do that, right? So the bugs that don't mind caffeine are the biggest problem. Like you want to make sure that you have really mitigated them as well as possible. So yeah, like not many bugs will deal with it, but the ones that do are not nice.
Man, I do not want to muck around with those bugs if they're jacked up on caffeine. No, thank you. So Pete's going to get his towed in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, I got 14 minutes actually.
So we'll wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
What? We'll start with you, Pete, since you're going to get your car towed potentially.
Yeah.
What's one thing you want to sign off with people on about coffee as it relates to sleep?
Oh boy. Okay. So as it relates to sleep, I think that managing how much and when you have it is the key, right? It's not about cutting out all caffeine for most people. It's about just conscious moderation. And that's hard when nobody knows how much caffeine is in the coffee to begin with. Mm. So I think that the more that we know, and not just from my company, but other companies giving more clear guidance and information about how much they have in there is going to help the general consumer, anybody who's drinking coffee, to have a better result.
Dr. Dean Miller?
Greatly put, Pete. I guess to summarize and sort of repeat what we were talking about before is timing and dose of caffeine and timing and duration of sleep, with probably more of an emphasis on the timing for most people, and having an understanding of controlling the dose in this context and still being able to have that really great cup of coffee, maybe having that taste of that double shot rather than a single shot, but having less caffeine is really great behaviorally for countermeasure. So yeah, timing, dose, timing, duration, and you'll be good.
Yeah, sign off before 12 caffeine wise, and you should be okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then pull it back.
Yeah, pull back. See, I like you, Dan. You're pro sleep, but that like doesn't have to mean anti coffee, and I like that.
Or for what's the opposite of anti coffee here?
Pro coffee.
Yeah, I want to be a coffee nerd, but not in this room.
Oh well, I mean, we'll get you some. We'll get you some Lorena. I actually just got some samples of some Lorena coffee, the best of Panama #1.
Oh, you got some. That's
I've
right.
got some.
Oh,
anyway,
I want to taste that.
That Lorena is worth $8,000 US for 1 kilo.
I did see your content on that just before.
But the record breaker is $30,000 for 1 kilo, and I get to try it this Thursday.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Amazing.
Damn. So I am very excited for that. But look, we'll spare Pete getting his car towed. Thank you so much, Dr. Dean Miller. Thank you so much, World Barista Champion Pete Licata. Caffeine Control Coffee, everyone, if you need some. And we can find your Instagram handle on Instagram is what, Dr. Dean?
Yeah, on Instagram it should just be Dr. Dean J. Miller.
Yeah, follow Dr. Dean J. Miller because you really need to. We'll tag you in the show notes as well. Yeah, follow his content. It's excellent. All right, we'll wrap it up there so Pete doesn't get his car towed. Thank you to everyone who listened. Hooroo, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Dean, for joining from Adelaide.
Hooroo.